steel band. All right. Um, Quickly, let us get the results of our morning poll, gentlemen.
All right. Well, for the first time, I think in a while, we have had a complete yes to our morning poll. Of course, this morning we asked should steel pan be taught in all the nation's schools? All our respondents to the poll said yes. All. Of course, people started to bat for their own pan side after a while, but all said yes to our poll,
All
and maybe
right.
we could start that.
All right.
I
So
see
let
a
us
smile on the Prime Minister's face.
let us introduce our guest this morning, the Honorable Prime
He
Minister
was
of the
saying
Republic
yes, but
of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm fine.
I see
Thank you.
we
How are
matching this
you?
morning, boy.
Huh?
I see we matching this morning.
Well, I mean, good things happen to good people, right?
There you go. There you hear it. Gentlemen, you all
Prime
heard
Minister,
that.
Prime Minister, welcome back.
Good, good,
I know
good morning.
Dr. Rowley really wanted to wear red, but you know what? He wear something close.
Oh, yeah, well, I should have worn a bright red shirt. Yeah, but the set seems to be all red. I'd have been lost because the banner with my name is beautifully red and my name in white. So I think that's
Well,
good enough.
should we have put it in any other color, Prime Minister?
Well, the fact that you know the color is good enough to me this morning.
Well, the national flag is red, white, and black. So
Yeah, well, that'll do it for us.
thank you for joining us this morning. We really appreciate you
Good
taking
morning,
the
Prime
time.
Minister.
Good morning. Who am I with this morning? I'm seeing some people I know. Who's that? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, I am the rose among the thorns. Of course, we have, I think you may know this chap, Wendell Stephen. He's in the top. I'm in the after him. Then you
Yeah.
got Rich in black and Paul in black and blue.
Okay, Paul is beaten up, right?
That is exactly what I said this morning. He got licks.
He come
Start
prepared for
already.
it.
He got
Well,
beaten up.
maybe
Yeah?
you could start by answering our question this morning.
Hold on. You're all asking me about my red. I have to ask Paul about his blue. How is your political?
We
Tell
asked
him
him that
that,
this morning too.
I warn him,
My political allegiance is independence.
I warn him about that blue this morning,
We did.
White may have flooded the screen too much. Would you care to answer our question this morning? It's World Steel Pan Day, UN designated. So we're very happy about that. We see Woodford Square beautifully prepared, and we expect lots of activities in Port of Spain. We know you're a pan aficionado. Our question this morning was, should the steel pan be taught in all the nation's schools? Quick answer.
I would say yes, because I mean it's a musical instrument, and I mean one of the regrets I have in life is that I was never able to a musical instrument, and if we're able to put it in all schools, I'm sure a lot of children would benefit, one, from the skill of learning to play music, and secondly, to play their national instrument. I would fully support that. But it's not cheap to do that, eh? I mean, the pan is not like long ago you go and pick up an old pan somewhere and make it a pan set in a school costs a few dollars. And we did have a program going, and it was going pretty well. It was disrupted, and we're thinking about strengthening back again. So I would look forward to that.
All right. Well, let's start from the perspective of yourself as on two hats. One, as the Prime Minister of the country, and two, as leader of a political party contesting the elections. What are your feelings on our readiness for Monday?
I think the country is ready. I think we as a party, we are ready. It's been a pretty rugged campaign, but it's been very vigorous. I'm hoping that there is a decent level of participation. I'm comfortable that we are getting there. We should have a good outcome in terms of an exercise.
Well, Prime Minister, I wanted to delve straight into the local government reform that the PNM has campaigning on, and that has been in the making for quite some time. Because I think outside of Terry Rondon and Irene Hines, I think I may be serving the third longest in terms of local government, and we have been hearing this issue of the reform for quite some time. I've attended a lot of the consultations. I feel confident now that it can happen. But how confident are you that it will happen?
Well, we have a law, and it's, parts of it have been proclaimed, and the rest of it is there to be proclaimed. And I am hoping that we have the endorsement of the national community to proceed as we have planned and as the program requires. It would be a pity if we find a reason, whatever that reason might be, to not implement what we are trying to do. And I am confident that it is good for the country, and the country will benefit from it. So I think we're on track. It's just that the population is being educated. One thing with this campaign, as an election campaign, I think it has been very educational, notwithstanding the extras that came into the campaign. But on the issue of local government, we have used the opportunity of the campaign to educate people about local government as it exists and its potential to do better.
You know,
Now,
interesting.
we have seen a video of members of the opposition whilst the consultations were taking place in support of local government. Are we satisfied? Because they are the corporations that are run by the opposition will also benefit from the local government reform. Are we satisfied then that we have done a sufficient enough job in explaining to them that, listen, your burgesses, your municipalities are also going to benefit?
Well, I don't know that we're dealing with kindergarten children. What you're seeing there is politics. When the consultation were taking place, those same people participated, were very positive in their endorsement of what the exercise was and what it portended. But then they have decided it's not politically wise for them to support it being operationalized. And what you see there is the leadership saying to them, don't do it. Because basically, if things are going well, they think the government will look good. And that is bad for their politics, but it's good for the country.
You know, I'm just wondering, because I saw the town hall meeting yesterday in Digger Martin, and and you brought up some interesting devolving of power from the main government to local government, in terms of even to the point of schools maintenance and stuff you suggested could be the long view in terms of that devolving of power. And I thought that very interesting. And I wasn't sure if that was encoded in the law, or if it's something that you will have to amend eventually, or if it will just be policy decisions in terms of that kind of devolving of power.
It will be policy decisions, but if you have a framework, you can use it once you are willing to use it. What's on the ground would be a structure, a management structure with the resources to handle responsibility. Then it would be that the government decides that we are from central government managing school maintenance, all aspects of it, more or less. We can start by putting some of that out to local government once we are convinced that they can handle it. Because there's no point in putting it out if there's nothing there to handle it, because you'll create a new problem. But local government being given that responsibility, we don't see anything that stands in the way of a properly functioning local government entity being prevented from taking that responsibility and running with it and doing a better job than what is happening now.
Yeah.
Two-part question, Prime Minister. One is regarding the local government reform as envisioned in the law. Richard indicated, or Wendell asked the question about the opposition not supporting it in principle. But when it becomes law, it's law. People will have to abide by the law. Hopefully they'll abide by the law. One, is there a timeline envisioned for the proclamation of the other parts of the law to fully operationalize? As you said earlier on, it has to be done in phases, not to create chaos, because it's a new system envisioned to operate differently.
Right. And that is precisely why we had asked for the extra year before this Privy Council intervention rushed it. We rushed it as a result of the Privy Council decision. because we anticipate exactly what you've said there. It's a transitional arrangement and a step-by-step arrangement. And to answer your question about a timeline, we were working against a certain timeline before the election came in August. And the timeline was getting it more or less in operation before the end of the year. So if the election was held a little later down, the implementation would have been almost immediate with the coming out of elections. But now we'll have to refashion that timeline, and there might be a little bit of a delay, but we're certainly on track to do it.
So we can expect that is the end of the year as originally envisioned?
Well, we will try. You see, the end of the year, we're going into the budget in September, October, right? We will have to cater, the Ministry of Finance now will have to cater, if we try for the end of the year, remember the fiscal year starts in October 1st, it might be a little difficult for us now to cater as we should for fiscal October to start it. But we certainly can look towards like January, right? So we have some planning to do still and some execution and arrangements, because what we're finding, it takes a while for changes to be made in the public service, and like you saw with the proclamation of the
procurement
legislation, even after we were working on that and being around for a long time, when we procured it, there was a whole lot of, well, I don't know, misunderstanding, some resilience, so we have to just cater for that transitional period.
Shouldn't the government be driving that though, particularly regarding procurement and the readiness of public entities and ministries, and in the same way through the Ministry of Local Government, getting corporations ready for what the new system will require by law?
Well, the government has been driving it, and I mean the government drove it from the level of the cabinet, the level of the ministry, but you'd be surprised how many horses you take to the water and some don't drink, right? So some people are just not prepared to accept change or to work with change. They can tell you how it used to be and what they know, and so it's easier said than done to say drive it and have it done. Because remember, you need the cooperation and buy-in of many people, some of whom may not be enthusiastic about what you're doing. And on the question of what about the law being in place and that we expect our colleagues to follow through, it all depends again on what enthusiasm they show. We created a borough in the parliament. We went through the process. We went through an election campaign in 2019, I think it was, and the borough of Siparia came up with Diego Martin. And you'd be surprised that since we have enacted the law to create the borough of Siparia, that people are just ignoring it. I mean, some of the spokespersons from the authority in Siparia would tell you a million reasons why they don't know what to do, they can't do it, they don't have this, they don't have that. That's just a lack of enthusiasm.
Yeah. As you speak about buy-in, Prime Minister, any of the local government reform proposals, is it predicated on the support of the opposition to get it moving?
Of the opposition?
Yes.
No, that support would have been required in the parliament. We didn't get it, but we got a majority support because the government is the majority. But we would, considering that there are 7 corporations in the opposition and 7 in the government, the absence of a political buy-in will just create obstacles that are the law overcomes it, because as you say, if it's the law, then it's the law. But if the law is there and people are resisting it or not buying into the fact that it's something that is worthwhile, it will not operate smoothly. It will operate, but not smoothly, especially if there's active resistance to it. Yeah. But what we're campaigning on is trying to actually hoping to prevent the resistance. We got the political resistance, but from an operational standpoint, we hope that that resistance does not come.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions. In terms of one, the Minister of Finance yesterday in Diego Martin raised the issue and did a very good job, I must admit, of explaining any confusion people would have had with regard to the rate of property tax and how it intersects with the LGE, local government reform. And I was wondering, this is just an aside, when you have when people get whatever it is that they have to pay coming from inland revenue, and they have to pay to their regional corporations or boroughs or city centers, is the Ministry of Digitalization part of the infrastructure that people will be able to make these payments online rather than having long lines of people trying to pay this tax to their respective regional corporations? That's
I know
one
that
question.
we are aiming for a whole of government digitalization. That ministry works with every other ministry to put the tool of digital benefit. So I don't know how ready they are for the whole operation, but once you would have heard me mention last night and before the whole question of a database.
Yeah.
That entities, cities, boroughs, and so should have a database. Now, that is an indication that we are looking forward to going digital in the corporation. And the whole question of tax, it would make it so much easier. And the answer is yes, that ministry will have a role to play. About how soon we'll do the changeover, because there's digitalization and digitization. So we have a ministry which has the responsibility for ensuring that as quickly as we are able to, we bring government activity into the digital era.
Yeah. And the second question I have with regard to local government and national policy, the issue of climate change, and there would be certain national policies with regard to that. I'm not so sure what the intersect will be with regard to the local government reform and the issue of tackling climate change, the evidence of which you've seen virtually every day around the planet, and how important that is as part of government policy.
Well, government policy is to continue to be a marketer of hydrocarbon products, which on one hand is a climate change concern, but we are greening some of those products. We are working hard towards green hydrogen and greening our point leases operations and so on. So we are doing that. On the other hand, we are moving right now. We constructing 10% of our electrical power from solar in our first project that is taking place now in central Trinidad, and we are going to have more of that. So the next thing is that I think we're just about the point of completing the preparations to move forward with allowing the decisions to be made to have TNTech accept. There's a little bit of work to be done and legal work to be done for TNTech to accept surplus power from producers who go solar. And once that happens, then at every level, and local government can have a role to play in that, in encouraging people and to go solar at the household level. And once you can get your excess power into the grid, then it will be a good encouragement, because right now it has been very difficult, even though we give incentives to people, because of the being accustomed to power at the rate at which we are selling power in Trinidad and Tobago. People have not been running to convert their supply from hydrocarbon to solar or wind. But we expect that more and more that will come. And so we are on track with that. So between the greening...
Are you expecting legislative changes to facilitate that, Prime Minister? Because it's a convoluted process to go to TNTech based on the present law and mount solar panels and get it connected to the grid in a safe way.
Well, but it is the engineering, the technical possibilities of doing that exist. So what we're doing now is dealing with that convoluted legal aspect of it. And that's where we are at the moment. But the last information I have is that they're getting over the hurdles of doing that. And we should be able to do that in the not too distant future. But that is something that you will have to do if you want to encourage widespread use of solar power. Because if you're not going to go and spend $100,000 as a small business or as a business, and then you generate power that you can't use. But if what you invest in generates enough power for you, and some surplus can be sold, then there's some incentive to go ahead and do it. So we as a country are moving towards that, where more and more people will see the benefits of doing that. and the policy is to encourage it.
Prime Minister,
I want
as
to
we
go back to the local government
of
issue.
public
And,
utilities.
Sorry, both of you were on at the same time. Sorry.
Yeah.
go ahead, Mando.
Yeah, I wanted to just stay under the rubric of public utilities because as we are involved in this campaign, as we walk the ground, and in several of the chats, especially in Port of Spain and in San Juan Laventille, a lot of issues surrounding water and WASA is surfacing. And it's coming across sometimes as almost like if it's being deliberately done to affect certain areas. I'm sure that those complaints would have reached your ears.
Well, we've been dealing with that, and in fact, there's one political entity whose campaign, deliberate campaign, is to disrupt the water supply, to create dissatisfaction in what they call PNM strongholds. They're trying to annoy people. So we actually have been dealing with it. We are aware of it. There is some interference with the water supply, especially in the area where it can be easily done, and you respond to it in one area and it springs up in another area. People who know the system have been interfering with it, and I hope after Monday they will see no benefit in doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Prime Minister,
again,
let's go back to the issue of local government campaign, and you indicated earlier when we started our conversation this morning that there has been a fervent, more than usual energized campaign for local government to what we become expected. You yourself have had your conversation series ongoing, last evening, and some political platform standardized one. Why do you think this particular local government election has generated that kind of enthusiasm? One, from the public, and two, from the political entities, including new entities that have joined the fray?
Well, one, I think on the government side, we are a major political party with support across the country, and we actually got involved in putting the issue before the population, so there was a lot of effort in that. On the other hand, our political opponents, seeing us operating in a difficult situation, they see opportunities for themselves to win support away from the government, and they too have put their best foot forward. And then there are third and fourth and fifth parties who see the traditional parties engage in this political battle and believe that there is opportunity for themselves. So basically, a lot of incentive has been there for people to get involved, hoping to do well in the electoral process. So it started out.
There's some who suggest that Tobago, for the PNM, and the losses in Tobago puts it as a high-stake election for the PNM, and for the UNC, their political leader, in some people's estimation, has to do well in this election because of the losses in the previous election. Is that a consideration at all from your side?
Well, political parties don't like to lose the election. In Tobago, we didn't do well in Tobago at all, but not for the first time. But we are not despondent about what's happening in Tobago. We have the opportunity to retool and come and return, and we will be there contesting again whenever the election comes around in Tobago, and we are confident that we'll do better. With respect to Trinidad, there have been some of our political opponents have been permanently engaged in feasting and feeding in the negatives, and they believe that this is an opportunity for them to do well, because they have sown the seeds of discord, and they believe that enough people have bought into it, and that will reflect itself in the polls. That is there to be seen. We, on the other hand, believe that we have done reasonably well and well enough to be supported by the population to continue doing their business in a serious and responsible way. So it's a looking into the future and reading the tea leaves and seeing different stories from different people. I mean, we as a government, we have been a target of negative descriptions. Even when Moody's say that we have done reasonably well and have given us a good mark as a country, you will hear some people say, no, that's not true. That doesn't matter. But if Moody's had said the opposite, well, oh, yes, you hear what Moody's say? That the country is in trouble. So some people they live in the negative because they figure that will work for them. We in the government, we live in the positive because we believe that what we are doing will redound to the benefit of the country, and we're making the best decision in a situation where when you're governing, you have a series of options. and you have to choose what you believe in your best judgment to be in the best interest of the population. And as we do that, we go with the confidence that we are making the right decisions in difficult situations, but we know that there are people who wouldn't agree, but we hope that the majority, or with the inflection of time, people will see that what we have done really was the best thing for the country at the time.
Yeah. And as we talk about politics and the high stakes in this election, Prime Minister, we would have seen two strategies: a strategy by the PNM, including yourself, to do more of the conversations, that more personal touch with the people. And then we would have heard on the opposition side this issue of stand your ground legislation and light it up and all these sort of things. Your thoughts on both strategies?
Well, as I said, the opposition is seeking to exploit what they believe are difficulties for the government. And one of those difficulties is the intractable crime wave that we have been having in this country. Crime has been on the increase, violent crime, gun crimes have been on the increase. And that has generated in the population a sense among people that because of the activity of the criminals, many people believe that the response to that should be that you get your own gun, so that if it ever comes your way, you will be able to fire back at those who come to fire at you. And the opposition sees that situation, and populists as they normally are, they decide that the thing to do is to feed into that. And that is where this offer of guns becoming more easily available became part of the campaign, guns being the response, and fighting back physically, where you end up, you put yourself in a position to kill the attacker. And so these are political expressions meant to tap into what is a general sentiment that we need to be responding, as they say, fight fire with fire, in response to the crime, the violent crime that is happening in the country. So it's opportunity,
But do you think the populist view is only able to gain traction at some level because of the context of the crime situation and people feeling that the TTPS at some level is not able to effectively deal with that? Because if many of the population thought the TTPS and the criminal justice system in general were able to manage the crime situation, would that populist view be able to gain traction at some level?
Well, I think, it will gain some traction, but I don't know how much. But at the end of the day, what we are trying to say is that you don't try to solve one problem by creating another. Because if you really provide guns to the whole population, if you are able to do that, what then is the scenario after? Do you really want to rely for your security on a situation where you have to be the fastest gun to survive? Or do you want a society where there is a functioning security system, namely the police and other aspects, that will guarantee your security or work towards your security, not having you to have the gun in your hand to shoot somebody who's coming at you?
Well, then are you satisfied with that the TTPS is there to provide that state intervention and performing adequately?
Well, that's the question. Is the TTPS fit for purpose? I think that is where the talk really is supposed to be. Is the police service and the general security apparatus of the state, is it fit for purpose? And the answer is that it has serious challenges, it has shortcomings, but by and large, it is on the job and it is doing reasonably well. You see, if we abandon the thought of a functioning police service and replace that thought with a population that will defend itself, then what about the geriatric person who can't handle a gun? What about the person who genuinely does not want to have a gun to defend him or herself? How are you going to secure those people? The one thing that supports everybody's needs across the board is a functioning police service. And that is why we are working to ensure that whatever the police service is, that we remove from it impediments like corruption, that we strengthen it, those who are hired, which is with more training, better equipment, better management, and so on. So we are to focus on overcoming the difficulties that may prevent the police service from being a better deliverer of safety and security. And not just the police service. We're talking about the Coast Guard, we're talking about the Defense Force, we're talking about the SSA, we're talking about the FIB, we're talking about whatever sustains the gangs, because the bulk of our crime problem is what is coming out of the gang culture in the country. And one of the things that we found as we went along the way was that the gangs fell in love with the guns because they get their power from the barrel of a gun. And then the supply of ammunition to the guns, we discovered that there were serious problems with respect to securing arms and ammunition in the country. And the criminals were getting virtually an endless supply of ammunition. And that has caused us to be rethinking how the police service...
How significant is that ammunition problem? Because while many are focused on the FULs and the firearms themselves that have come out of that FUL situation, you have now referenced a scenario that I've heard before about the amount of ammunition floating around the country that is not being regulated properly.
Well, it is very significant. You see, we were focusing almost 100% on the illegal entry of arms and ammunition. And we have to do that because being an island nation, every square inch of our border is a place where somebody can come to us by sea and try to enter, not just to our designated ports. So we have this, and then we have a South American neighbor close to us where guns can come to us, and we have other sources. So we have this permanent requirement to prevent illegal arms and ammunition from coming in. But then as we were dealing with that and looking at what is actually happening, we then stumbled upon the problem that, listen, it is not just the illegal entry. It is the legal ports of entry, and it is the inability of the police service to maintain a system that can guarantee that when arms and ammunition, especially ammunition, come into the country, that ammunition does not fall into the hands of persons who can't go to the shop and buy. Many persons in the country can't go to the shop and buy ammunition because they don't have a firearm user's license, but they have an illegal gun. And the question you have to ask is it that they only get their supply from those who manage to bring some ammunition through the illegal source? But we are of the view that it is quite possible and likely that some of the ammunition that came in legally is ending up in the hands of criminals.
That's a frightening thought, you know.
There was a case in St. James a few months ago where they decided to kill one man in St. James, and at close quarters, they fired 62 bullets at that man. Now, if bullets were hard to come by and you have an illegal firearm, you wouldn't waste it like that. And given the frequency with which criminals are firing bullets in this country, one can come to the conclusion that bullets are not hard to get. Otherwise, you wouldn't see them using it so frequently and firing it in that volume when they try to attack people. And then we decided then to do an audit of the import and handling system. So we go to the customs and say, okay, tell me what ammunition has come in here, who's brought it in and how much. That is pulling teeth. After months of going down that road, I could tell you now, we have not been able to determine from the customs department how much arms and ammunition are coming to this country and who brought it in. We go to the police and say, okay, you've issued permits for millions of rounds of ammunition to Tom, Dick, and Harry. How much did Tom bring in? Did Harry bring in all of his own? Where's Tom storing? And then you discover the information is not readily available. So then you start going to the arms dealers and asking them, show me your books, let me see what you've imported, let me see what you've sold. And you're being told, well, somebody stole my books a few months ago and I don't have any books. That is what we are faced.
Wow.
You have just described a very frightening scenario,
Yes.
Prime Minister.
Very
frightening scenario.
That is precisely what we're dealing with. And then, of course, you would see people who get permits. We were bringing to this country, say, 7 or 8 million rounds of ammunition per year for all the users and managing it in the governments, in the public system. Then perhaps you see permits for 20 million rounds of ammunition to one person. So it became an explosive business. And once you can't account for the ammunition that is coming through legally, all that you would have done there is multiply the problem, add that to the illegals.
But is that a failing of the Ministry of National Security and the audit and the regulation systems for that? Or where did that failing take place?
Failing took place, as you said, of the system. What is happening? What ought to have been happening is that the police was supposed to be keeping a close tie and monitoring of permits being issued, importation of the ammunition. It goes to a dealer. You check the dealers regularly, see what they're doing with it. See, they have to account to who they're selling it to, how much they're selling, how they're securing it. I mean, the police, what we discovered is that that monitoring system had virtually collapsed. Because to tell me that you could find a dealer who could tell you that he can't show you his books because he has none, because somebody steal them, should tell you how lax the system was.
Absolutely.
Then who is going to buy, who did you sell it to? If you have no books, who did you sell it to? And we've discovered situations, in at least one situation, where a dealer would have sold a gun to a person who did not have an FUL. Right? And then you would have seen FULs going to people who are deportees, people who have criminal records. These are not things that are supposed to be happening.
But all of those examples that you're giving, Prime Minister, isn't it reason enough to devolve that duty out of the TTPS and into a separate body to deal with firearms and the monitoring of ammunition and all of those things in a more ordered and structured way that can hold people accountable?
That is why I have said, only last night you might have heard me saying, that based on the various audits, reports that we have in front of us now as a result of us looking at this situation, we will have to review the system. The system where the Commissioner of Police is the sole arbiter as to whether somebody could or could not get a firearm has generated the potential for corruption. And in many instances, it has gone beyond the potential. Right? Because some people have actually used that potential to create what has been called a well-oiled criminal enterprise with its root in the police service. You would have seen a number of police officers on charge with coming out of the, I think, either 8 or 10 police officers are currently before the court for activity in that firearms unit. And
you mentioned earlier on that 7, is it, just want to confirm, 7 to 8 million rounds of ammunition imported annually?
It grew. I mean, I have to figure somewhere here. It was like 2 million, 3 million, and then it jumped to the last batch of permits is 58 million, that's all, or something like that. But the thing about it, there's a substantial increase in the attempt to buy or actual purchase of ammunition in the country and firearms. So
can you disaggregate that in any way in terms of law enforcement, police, army, coast guard, and private use?
I am talking here purely about what's happening for civilians. I'm not talking about what is brought for the
state.
I'm talking about for civilian use, right? And
you're talking about, Prime Minister, millions of rounds of ammunition coming into the country annually for civilian use?
Yes, and what is more troublesome to me, in some instances, large volumes are being imported by one, say a firearms dealer imports a large amount. Before, it was being imported in a way that you don't run out, but you never have a huge stock as an ammunition dump anywhere. Because the fear is this: if you have a dealer with a huge amount of ammunition on his or her compound, and the criminals attack that compound one night, it means that they can go away with a huge amount of ammunition. That is one of the potential, especially if the ammunition is not properly secured or if there is corruption in the commission of that crime.
But you've said earlier, Prime Minister, that that's one scenario. You've indicated earlier on that there are dealers who cannot provide records to the authorities of the cadre of ammunition, and in some instances, I guess, arms they have. How is that tenable in this scenario?
Well, there have been instances of that situation. From the reports I have seen that as an outcome of the investigation. I don't know if you have noticed that, I had indicated after one of those reports that I would have to take this to the parliament, because in the parliament there's a national security committee in the parliament, and the population needs to know what's going on here. And immediately, huge legal ramifications flow from that. As Prime Minister and Chairman of the National Security Council, I was taken to court. I had to be in court. A judge had to adjudicate on whether the report should be destroyed and whether the public could know about the report. I am currently injuncted from doing anything with the report until the police has completed their own work, right? The national security work that was done in the original reports, those are injuncted by the courts. I went to a political platform in St. James recently, and I spoke about an affidavit that was published in the Newsday, written by the Commissioner of Police in her defense in a lawsuit that is going on. And I quoted from that affidavit, and it should make chilling reading, because this is the Commissioner of Police telling you what she has found in the police service. So here's a case where we have fallen down on the job where the guards who were supposed to be guarding us needed to be guarded.
But that's
But
not,
in addition to that,
that's not news to a large portion of the population and how they perceive the TTPS.
Well, that is not a good thing, and is something that requires urgent attention, and we are trying to give it that attention, because we have a problem with the illegal entry. That as long as there are people outside trying to come into us and people inside trying to bring into us arms and ammunition without proper controls and so on, we have that to deal with. But over and above that, where we thought we had a managed situation, it turns out to have been quite obsolete. The arrangements are obsolete, and of course, there was criminal intent in some parts of it. So that just worsened the problem.
But you've described the perfect storm, legal and illegal, posing a problem in one small jurisdiction.
Well, maybe that's what it is, but it has to be handled, and we are handling it.
How concerned are you as head of the National Security Council about consistent reports about police ammunition or national security ammunition, issued ammunition, also ending up in crime scenes?
Well, that is a cause for concern, but then you have to try and figure out where it came from. And it requires a very detailed and persistent analysis as to the easiest thing that one can say, well, okay, somebody stole it from the defense force. But that might be too easy and too simple. It might not be the only route.
Before we move off national security, I just want to get an update from you about if you had sight of a documented report on the Brent Thomas issue that occurred in Barbados through the Ministry of National Security. The police commissioner came before the GSC National Security weeks ago and indicated that she would have supplied a documented report given the gravity of that situation cross-jurisdictionally on the Brent Thomas issue. Have you had sight of a documented report on that?
No, I've heard about it. I talked to the Minister of National Security about it all the time from the very beginning. I followed what happened in the Barbados Parliament. You would have seen, to me, the most useful intervention so far in that matter is what the Barbados Attorney General said to the Barbados Parliament. That was clear and concise. But many people have conspiracy theories that don't accept what was said there. They don't need evidence. They just need to stir up Manima. But there's a major lawsuit. This matter is a major lawsuit. And the state is engaged in an appeal of the judge's findings and order. And once that lawsuit is going on, it restricts what the government can do at the time. And that's what's going on. But there has been some very serious developments as a result of that lawsuit. because at the level of the government, we don't agree that the police acted capriciously or with any malice. What the police was doing was seeking to get answers to questions by way of the warrants, and it was all done under the guidance of the DPP's office, and what they found was quite troublesome. In fact, one of the court's orders, which is to give back to the person who took the government to court, is to give back to that person automatic weapons and explosives. And I mean, the government found this very alarming, and that is where we are now, where we are appealing that decision. So,
are you satisfied that the TNT law enforcement operated within the embassy bill, given what the Barbados Attorney General has said in the Barbados Parliament?
Well, we said that from early, that there was the safe legal procedure was not followed, and you would have heard the Barbados Attorney General saying the same thing, and saying that if, as a result of that, there's liability for the government of Barbados, then the government of Barbados will accept that liability. And because it was Barbados police acting on the request of Trinidad and Tobago police that the man was apprehended in Barbados. And then they did so on the presentation of a warrant from Trinidad and Tobago. It is quite normal for police units to assist another police unit. The Trinidad police discovered that the person was on the move out of the country while certain police work was going on here with respect to the person's business. And they asked Barbados police to determine whether the person had arrived there and to keep eyes on the person because they have a warrant for him. And Barbados said, well, we have our eyes on him. Where's the warrant? Trinidad police went to Barbados with the warrant. Barbados police apprehended the person, and the information that the police and the Barbados police has put to the country and their country is that the person agreed to return voluntarily once the warrant had been presented. However, that story changed in Trinidad, where it was said that the man was kidnapped and abducted and all his rights. So this has to be adjudicated upon by the court. It was by the court at one level, and it's now being appealed. So we have to go through the court process.
Prime Minister, just jumping back a bit to the
Can you share how high the authorization for that came in Trinidad and Tobago? How high did the authorization for that come? Is it the Commissioner of Police? Is it DCP?
For what?
Would you share? Can you share that?
What?
For the operation to go to Barbados and detain the individual.
From what I don't know that I've seen all the information, because I have to keep my distance from it. But from what I have seen, it was at a high level in the police service. I have not seen it at the highest level, but it was a senior police officer who was involved in the whole question of the operations here in Trinidad and the chasing of what they believe.
Because it's cross jurisdictional, would it have to have had authorization from the Commissioner of Police, given the ramifications of a cross jurisdictional operation?
I couldn't answer that. I don't know what the law requires in that. The lawyers will have that the lawyers will determine that. But certainly, as a police operation, it is not uncommon for senior officers to pursue their quarry without going to the commissioner at the top. But if it's interjurisdictional, just to be safe, I think people would go as high up as they deem necessary. But I've seen it said that, it couldn't have gone on without the minister and without the prime minister, and all that is just so much hogwash. Because I first saw the first bit of information I saw about this particular matter was in the newspapers when the judge had ruled. Nowhere along the way where the police was getting its information, going to get the warrants, doing the searches at the man's premises. I was totally oblivious to that, and members of the cabinet, as far as I know. The first time I saw anything about this matter was what I read in the newspapers, and I realized we got a problem here. And then information started coming with it, and the government started responding to it by virtue of the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General will keep me apprised of what is happening.
Prime Minister, earlier on this week, we had done a poll based on a comment you had made concerning Jack Warner's re-entry into the politics. I think we might have done that poll 2 days ago, Paul, or yesterday, I think. In terms of him re-entering politics to maybe starve off the extradition that he may be facing. You care to comment on that?
Well, I don't know. Jack Warner has never left politics, you know. I don't know why you're all saying that Jack Warner entered politics. We entered politics. Jack Warner has, as far as I am concerned, has never left the political arena. When Jack Warner came out of the UNC, he created the ILP. The ILP contested elections. They were unsuccessful, both general and local. Jack Warner then formed a newspaper, something called The Sunshine. And he has relentlessly used that paper as a political weapon against the government, the PNM government. Because Jack's singular problem is that he does not intend to report to the courts in Miami or wherever else he's charged with the various charges that he has to face, all of them serious criminal charges. You would have seen from the US end what that difficulty is. And Jack's response to that is to find solace and comfort where it exists. And as far as he's concerned, the PNM government is cooperating through the law with the United States for his extradition. And he has reason to not be friendly or easy with the PNM government. Every Friday, Jack Warner ran a whole newspaper on me or the government or some other minister. So he never left the political arena. What has happened now is the UNC that had pretended to take a principled stand on Jack Warner and his corruption issues. When you told him, go and clear your name if you want to function in the government or in the party. As far as we're aware, Jack has not cleared his name. As a matter of fact, worse things have happened since Jack Warner left the government, because there's a court where there was a court matter about the ownership of that so-called center of excellence, which I call the center of shame. CONCACAF has sued Jack Warner over misappropriation of money on that center of excellence. Jack did not put in a defense in the court, or whatever he did. The bottom line is, a ruling was made, and they have a claim against him for $75 million, claiming that center of excellence because it was corruptly handled and built. So that wasn't there in the beginning. That came out of court proceedings. And that is after and over and above the Simmons report, which had identified him. And all of these things were known to the UNC and are still known to the UNC. But they believe now, okay, we can pretend that that is not so and invite Jack Warner back onto our political platform. So that is the return to politics, as far as you all are seeing it. But Jack never left the political arena. And because as long as those charges are over his head, what they have just done there, it's obvious to me that to get him back on their platform, or wherever else they want him, a deal has been struck, which is very similar to the one with Ishan Steve, where if we get into government, we will not pursue your extradition. And the government can drag its feet. The Attorney General can do what happened under the UNC, which is to pretend that it was being done when it's not being done. You remember? We had got to the point in this country where the extradition proceedings for Ishan Steve had gone to the Privy Council. And the ruling was made and it was done. And they were supposed to be extradited because the process would have been ended after the complaints. And what happened? The Trinidad and Tobago government went to the court and told our local judge, don't allow the extradition to take place because we are about to lay charges imminently here. And the judge agreed, and that didn't happen. And what happened? Jeez. What happened since then? Yep. It's now about 10 years or more. Nothing has happened. So what is happening is that people who have serious questions to answer, the new model, once you have the money, the new model is you get the court to be delayed or obstructed, so you never have to answer it in court. And that's
and how could a government get around that, especially a government that would have gotten the population to agree with them that we have an issue of corruption here and we need to vote us in and we could fix that, we could correct that. How do we get around those issues?
Government has to get around it by fighting in the court. And when you're in the court, you're on the same level as the criminal in terms of the balance in the court. You know, the scales in court proceedings Once you get into the court, the scales are supposed to be level. No one side is supposed to be heavier than the other. So what is happening, what they have discovered, that once you have the resources to fund your presence in the court, whether it is through appeals or the best lawyers or all of that, you know, that the best friend of the criminal these days is delay, obstruct. Right? That's what's happening.
Prime Minister, on a separate note, and I know the interview is coming to a close shortly, are you satisfied that under your stewardship that the government has achieved what it wants to achieve in terms of results with regard to delivery of results? Because that's the benchmark that the electorate really judges you on. How much has my life changed? How much has my life improved?
Well, I don't think we have achieved everything that we said about to do. There are some significant things that we have not achieved, but we have engaged them, but the results have not been the way. I mean, we've achieved a lot of what we set out to do in the field of energy, in the field of education, in the field of health, in the field of Tobago. We have achieved a lot of those things, but in the question of crime and associated matters, we have certainly not achieved that. And that is why the whole issue of crime has become the major political Achilles heel and point of attack for those who are threatening the government in terms of questioning the government's competence and ability. But people are to be reasonable. We expect that the average person is reasonable. They would understand that what we are doing is not something you can just flick a switch and it goes from dark to light. We have to engage people who are resisting. I just mentioned to you the question of what happens in the courts. But remember, the government has absolutely no influence in the court system. So when somebody gets charged, when the police apprehend somebody and identify them for a crime, and take from them, the minute that person is apprehended by the police and goes into the judicial system, not only is the government without any function inside there on that particular matter, but the government is required to stay away from it. And that decision is made by others. No, I mean, nobody's asking the judiciary why a case takes so long, why you don't get a judgment, why a person who comes before the court frequently is being treated with kid gloves, why a person with a firearm is getting a sentence. Nobody asks those people that, because their independence is preserved for good reason. But
well, that's interesting, Prime Minister, because most recently, the Master of the High Court, Master Christian Allen Morris, came before the GSC National Security and presented some data from May 2022 to May 2023 in terms of persons who have gotten bail. During that period, she cited 698 persons, matters of, and only 39 getting bail.
Really? So,
when you mention that persons are being treated with kid gloves,
well, no, I'm talking about sentencing. That was sentencing. We have seen sentencing that we thought the sentence could have been more severe to be a deterrent. But of course, we don't make that decision. That decision is made by somebody else who is adjudicating on a variety of matters and come to the conclusion that the sentence should be light. But the bottom line is the people who are committing the crime, right? They are not taking the position where, look, I've made enough damage, or I was in trouble and I'm out, let me stay away from trouble. We have a very high level of recidivism, right? People get into the system, they commit a crime, they're going through the system, and while they're going through the system, they have to get bail. They have cash bail. You have to get. We are now accepting cash for bail. Well, of course, either you or your friends in the gang will commit the crime to get the money to pay your lawyer, to pay the bail. So it's a complicated, ongoing enterprise, and at every stage, the government has some responsibility. So the government is permanently engaged, right, from trying to prevent the crime from happening, to ensuring that the criminal is found, that to providing the resources to the judiciary to make sure that they operate in a timely manner in dispensing that justice. Then you have to secure the persons who are convicted, and then you get to the prison story. And so it's a complete circle in which the government is engaged. And if there's weakness at any point in that circle, then things can break down.
In terms of your leadership style, Prime Minister, I mean, when you self-reflect on your leadership style, because, I mean, some of it is in your book, but what do you see as the core values of your leadership style? And do you think that you're inspirational and transformational enough as a leader?
Well, transformational, I think that I am, because I was able to do that in the PNM. I think I've transformed the PNM considerably. As a government, I think I've made some very difficult decisions. I led my government to make some difficult decisions for the benefit of the country. In terms of inspirational, well, I don't know who I inspire, but I think by keeping my team together and keeping the country whole, I think that is something that I can take comfort in. You know, making a decision not to devalue the currency when all the experts were telling us that that's what you're supposed to do. Devalue the currency to 8 to 1, to 10 to 1, that would make it, you will get enough Trinidad and Tobago dollars to meet your requirements and to pay your bills and so on. But then one had to make a decision. What then is the value of that, of the dollar then? And what the effect of that will be? And we have resisted that. Then at one point, when we were running out of, when our foreign exchange was being threatened and our revenue was at its lowest, we were the conversation about the looming of an IMF program was in front of us. And we took the decision that whatever the situation, we are going to ensure that we do not have to resort to an IMF program. And we had to take certain decisions for that to happen. For us not to rely on the IMF to go to an IMF program with their conditionalities, we had to make certain other decisions. One of those decisions is the getting out of the refining business. The refining business, which was Petrotrin's oil refining business. We had to take that very difficult decision of shutting that refinery down to create a new situation with Heritage, where we stay in the oil business and use the oil business to pay the debt. One of those debts was $850 million US that was due in August 2018. And had we not been able to deal with that debt, it would have been a horse of a different color today, because we might have had to devalue the currency. We would have been significantly downgraded. That means the cost of our borrowing would have increased. Then, if we had defaulted on any one of those loans, then there's a cross-default mechanism where all the other loans will become due. So there was one time when the Minister of Finance was up to his eyeball in trying to find money to pay public servants at the end of the month from borrowing. And one of those lenders, the loan came due, was $200 million US. And that loan came due. And they wanted it, and they had to get it within 14 days. If we did not pay that loan within 14 days, that would have been a default. And you know what would have happened then? Other loans would have cascaded into default. So we had to do what we had to do to make sure that that $200 million US was available in 14 days to pay those bondholders.
Speaking of the energy sector, there have been the reports about the shutdowns of the number of plants. There's the issue of the refinery that went up for sale. OWTU bid, but the government did not accept the offers. Can you give an update on the refinery sale issue, and two, your thoughts on the issue of our how efficient our energy sector is? We've received some windfalls because of the Russia-Ukraine situation, the price of energy going higher than normal. Winter is coming in the temperate countries, and the prices are expected to, the demand is expected to go up, which means we may also benefit from that. Where do you see our prospects in the next year to two in the energy sector, based on our challenges with production of gas from where we were 5-10 years ago, and this still being our main bread basket moving forward?
Trinidad and Tobago, as a producer of hydrocarbons, oil and gas, especially gas, we are relatively efficient. We work on world standards in the gas sector and the petrochemical sector. There's no question of efficiency there. We do continuous upgrades, Point Lisas, to make sure that we get the best of the technology that's available worldwide. These are world-scale businesses. It is not only a question of efficiency we're looking at here. It's a question of supply. Our gas fields are among the most heavily used in the world because we were early in the use of gas in producing LNG. So our pools of gas in our gas fields have been considerably reduced. So we have gone down from being a user at Point Lisas of 4.1 billion cubic feet per day to 2.8, sometimes 2.6. The recent disruption that you saw there, the plant shutting down, again, those were safety operational issues where something happened on in one company at the wellhead, and these things, the safety margins are extremely tight. You don't take chances. So they had to shut the operation down to rectify the problem, and they've since come back on track. So these are difficulties that go par for the course in the operations. But the real problem that we have is that our production of gas is on the low side. And this is not anything surprising because it is a wasting resource. The more you take out is the less you have left. You may remember when England was a major producer of oil in the North Sea. The North Sea fields were one of the world's leading producers, and it moved the English from being the sick man of Europe to being a major player in the EU. The British government used the North Sea oil and gas to reset the country. The same way we use gas here to support Trinidad and Tobago. Now, oil in the North Sea is secondary type companies doing mopping up because they've used up most of the resources there. So even though they're still producing oil in the North Sea and there's still operations going on there, it is not on the same scale with the same prospects for the future as it was 20 years ago or 15 years ago. So what we have been doing is trying to find new fields or to get more out of the existing fields. And that's what we've been doing. And new fields within our own border or looking at fields outside of our border, because the long-term future of staying in the gas business in the way that we've known it will require a significant amount of gas which we do not now have in our border. And we keep exploring. We found some gas in our border recently, but again, not on the scale to change and bring us back to where we were when we were at peak. Because remember, you have to replace, to stay in the business. For every molecule you use today, you have to replace it if you are going to stay in the business next month and next year. So there's a replacement issue to stay at the level that you're at. And if you want to go to a higher level, you have to replace it with a higher volume of gas, which is not now easily available to us.
Was the government able to have conversations with Anthony Blinken about the horizon for the Dragon gas field initiative, given the limitations that were initiated before?
There's nothing that we have not raised with the United States on that matter. So in the end, we were able to persuade them to give us a carve out from the sanctions. But when that came, it came with an umbilical cord of it had an attachment to it, which the Venezuelans aren't happy with. But we did manage to convince the Americans to relieve us of the sanctions, the blanket sanctions that were affecting us as it was in the beginning. So while we have what you call an OFAC license, and we could go from the American standpoint and the sanction standpoint, we could go and operate the field. But from the Venezuelan standpoint, we have to get a license from Venezuela. That license has not yet been forthcoming because the Venezuelans don't like that final term that the Americans have put on the carve out.
While we're still on energy economy, which of course is what we're talking about here, and I know the government constantly indicates that, how urgent is it from your perspective as the Prime Minister to give more and more energy and drive to transforming the diversification of Trinidad and Tobago into other sectors? I know some of it is happening, but how much of it are you satisfied it's happening quickly enough and with enough energy?
Well, there is a lot of energy in it, but the fact that it has not happened yet I think one can say it's not happening quickly enough, but we are making some major strides. As a matter of fact, we're just about to complete a manufacturing park at a cost of $500 million. And that park will have in it production which the country does not now have in oil and gas, but is manufacturing products for sale in the region and in the outside world, made in Trinidad and Tobago. And that investment is the kind of investment that we need to make to do business other than oil and gas business. So we are doing that. And on the agricultural side, we've got a Ministry of Youth Development, which is focusing very heavily on encouraging young people to enter training programs and production systems to use modern technology to become producers of food. What that will do, it will reduce our reliance on imported food, save foreign exchange, create employment for and entrepreneurial opportunities for young people, and that is a good way going forward. So when we are doing fairly well in our non-oil sector, and the private sector has been coming to the party on that with full government support. So we just have to stay the course.
And what about the issues of the digital economy, which I know the Minister of Finance raises from time to time, and the issue of how that intersects with our education and curriculum? Because you have many countries who have started coding in primary schools, and for several years now, Trinidad and Tobago seems to still be vacillating on the issue. At least that's my perspective. Maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong. But those kinds of issues to take advantage of how do we grow the economy from the digital, from a digital side in terms of coding and apps and software and the creation of that whole sector?
Well, the government is doing and encouraging some of that. If you know, we spent the Ministry of Digital Transformation and Education. We have a lot of systems going. We're providing Wi-Fi across the country. We are moving our systems from paper. It was this cabinet that I lead here is the first cabinet that has gone paperless. We in the school system, I can tell you, while we were locked down for COVID, one of the things I did for my constituents, I raised enough money to put build a computer lab equipment in all my primary schools. I got 120 of the best computers and put a dozen of them in each school. And so in our primary schools, children have good equipment to be introduced to. And of course, with in terms of cell phone saturation and cell phone usage, Trinidad and Tobago is right up there with the rest of the world. And so we are gradually or faster getting into digital. What we're aiming to do, and one of the big areas we should be aiming to go, is to paperless transaction, cashless transactions. That is the one area I think we're moving too slowly on. But hopefully we can accelerate that with the work that is going on in some in the private sector and some in the government sector. So if when we get to an era of cashless society, a whole lot of changes will become very obvious. But we are a people who have been very reluctant to make change. I mean, I myself, I am very, maybe it's because I don't understand the system as a programmer, but I have a difficulty in turning over my bank account to my phone and to two clicks. Okay, you can laugh at me, right? But
you're old school. That's all right.
No, I am not laughing. I'm just about the admission of it.
Scotiabank was giving lessons to seniors.
I'm old school in music. I like to know where my money is. I understand dollar bills because you notice. I mean, I was very out front then when we did the currency change over to the new polymer $100 bill. I was right on track with that. But I am learning all the time. But I'm a great supporter of the digital transformation. And that's why I sought and found Dr. Mr. Bacchus, encouraged him to come into the government and to take responsibility. Because
and look at you this morning. You're doing an interview online, so we're proud of you.
It's probably your
Our
first
friends, just
online
three
interview.
quick points because we're running out of time. One, an update on the Petrotrin refinery sale, which has been in abeyance for a while. Before we move to cricket.
We have had lots of people come and sniff around that, but we have never had a serious proposal that we could say take to the end. In terms of, you keep talking about patriotic. These people have never made a serious proposal to the government. We gave them carte blanche up front with assistance. The proposal they put to us was a proposal that says, look, you give us bonds, right? You the seller, you the owner of the refinery, you give us bonds, tradable bonds, and we will use those bonds to fund our involvement in the refinery. We say we can't do that. Because if we give you tradable bonds, and that's equivalent to giving you cash, because you will then go just trade the bonds, get cash, and you go your way and say, well, I can't manage this. So that was the proposal that we got. Asking the government to provide them with bonds that are tradable. Right? No government could agree to that. Because once the bonds that you intend to get from the government, even if you can then trade those bonds, what does it prevent you from trading them and saying, look, I've converted the cash, I have the cash, it's mine that you've given to me, but I don't think I want to spend it on that refinery. So we got foreigners who came and made proposals, and then when you examine the proposals, you discover that they're not really of any substance. And it usually flounders on the question of where's the money to back up what you're saying? Where's the financing? And where's the oil supply? And then you realize that they too want something that you can't give. So that is what that has been. We have not.
So the government is wary of being left with a liability in the end of those arrangements.
No. It is not a liability. And I want to make this very clear. It is not a liability. The government was involved in the oil refining business, and to do that, the government had to have a refinery. The government came out of the refining business, and that is the only reason why there is a refinery there now which is not being used. It was not the government's intention to having come out to find a way back into it as a government. We said if there's anybody with oil who want to use it, then it's available, but the government has come out of that business. So the refinery is not something that the government is saying, when do we get back into it as a government? Because the main reason why we came out of it is because we had to import oil to refine there. And that importation of oil to refine that refinery was a huge money loser. Right? And we could not afford to be losing money on that scale in this kind of over season. Right? Maybe earlier on when we had other revenue strengths, we could have supported the Petrotrin. Right now, even as I talk to you now, it is very regular where requirements come to the Minister of Finance to service 50 million US, 30 million US from Petrotrin, because this is money that was incurred to buy oil mainly. And it was always a situation where if the company could not pay for the oil, the government will pay for it. So we had to get to that business. And the fact that the refinery is there not being utilized is not a requirement for the government to go and try to start it back.
Campaign, we have an election due on Monday and one scheduled for 2025. Is campaign finance law on the government's legislative agenda in the next year and a half, 2 years?
It's in the parliament. We have done some work on that, and we are anticipating that we could do that. We'll try to do that. We have another 24 months to get some things done, and that could be one of them. Because,
is it a priority for the government?
It has been. That's why we have done the work that we've done so far. And where it will fall on the legislative program, I couldn't tell you today, but we're looking towards that.
Yeah.
Campaign finance, whistleblower legislation, and so on. Those are things that we hope we can get done.
West Indies cricket. West Indies cricket. You've been very strong about championing a reversal of fortunes in West Indies cricket, because I may not be a cricket fan myself, but certainly pride it brings me as a West Indies, a Caribbean person. I can't discount that. You know, it's a unifying force. It's done us wonders over the last couple of decades, but it's not where it was decades ago. What is the plan for this committee that's been put in place by CARICOM in terms of reversing it? Is there a structure in place, or is it the embryonic stages of discussions?
Well, I've just taken it over the chairmanship from Prime Minister Gonzalez, and he took it over from Prime Minister Mitchell. What I am hoping to be able to do during this period when I'm chairing is to use that label to pull together initially a number of people who are what I consider to be stakeholders, and the objective is to see whether we can, both the cricket, West Indies cricket, the public sector, which is the governments of the region, and the private sector, to buy into a plan that we can devise. And that plan is not to win the next match or to win the next series. That plan is to rejuvenate cricket in the region, starting with school cricket, club cricket, and then the management of the professional output from that. Where we have fallen down, because I was in Australia a couple of years ago, a few years ago, and I spent some time with Cricket Australia trying to understand how they had lifted themselves out from the situation that they were in, which was very much like what we are in now, which is a decline in cricket, and they were not producing world-beating teams or teams that could defend themselves on the cricket field. That was the Allan Border period. And Cricket Australia explained to me that what they did, they separated cricket into two prongs. There was a management of the cricket itself, and there was a management of the cricket business. And that is what Cricket Australia is. And I've been looking at that in the West Indies, and I think that there is something to be learned there. And as I talk to people like Andy Roberts and Viv Richards, Michael Holding, people like that, it is clear that there's a frustration among all of them that we are not doing as good as we could because there are solutions available. But the cricket world has changed. And whatever solution we come up with, it has to take into account that this is an environment that is different to the environment in which we were the world beater. And it changed in very many ways. The money that is going after certain aspects of the game makes it very difficult to have a straightforward management of your business and your players and have them commit to you if you can't pay them in the way that they're being paid in other areas. And there are different models around the world. And then we have this fundamental problem here of who owns West Indies cricket? That's a question that the Indian government had answered and the Pakistani government. In the West Indies, we don't even ask the question. And we're stumbling from one difficulty to another. And if there's a third division in cricket, in world cricket, we're going to get them there very quickly. Because right now we're struggling to beat Oman. Right? So we have to get our act together very quickly. And hopefully during this period that I'm here, the one thing I want to come away with is a plan that can be operationalized where over a 5 to 7 year period, we could raise our cricket back up to a certain level that we target.
Well, we can then good news with sport. Our youth Commonwealth Game participants have done us very proudly. I think 4 gold medals, 3 silver and 3 bronze on last count. And the ceremony closes today. And I think they've done us really, really proud. So I want to give you a chance, of course. We're going to give you a chance to congratulate them.
Again, this is one of the things that we should be proud of. To host a multi-sport event like this with, I think, 79 countries, Commonwealth countries, was a major undertaking. And when we agreed to do it, we were in a very difficult period, but we thought that we must challenge ourselves. And I think the Ministry of Sport and Sport TT and UDCOT came to the party and our young people. Unfortunately, I don't think that enough people in the country rallied around them to make use of the opportunity to. I myself, I wanted to be there. Only yesterday, I wanted to go to the relays. I couldn't get away to go to see the relays yesterday afternoon because I had other engagements that I had to deal with. But it was a good learning experience, and I hope we can do it again sometime. And our youngsters have made us proud. from the march past to the competition. So we do have the talent, and not that we didn't know that before. We have been producing world-class talent way back in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. So we need to stay with that. That's one area that we must not let our heads go down on, and we must allocate the resources to ensure that the talent is brought and nurtured and supported to occasions like that. We do some facilities. We've invested in certain facilities in the country, and what these junior games have done is to show that we have the ability to handle bigger and better events.
Yeah. Prime Minister, just a couple of things before we close off. I know that I suspect that the party has been doing polling and so on. What is the prognosis for the results on Monday, August 14th?
We expect to win.
Okay.
Win more seats or keep the seats in the areas you have, the corporations you have. Win more corporations or keep the corporations you have. What define win for us?
We expect to win. And by win, I mean we expect to be satisfied with our efforts. And I trust that you will. I trust that you all will go out and vote.
I don't expect any other answer from you, Prime Minister.
And vote wisely.
Vote for the PNM. But let me tell you something, Prime Minister, something publicly that I haven't been able to tell you privately. In that when I served, after 11 years, when I lost in 2010, for all intended purposes, my politics are done. It was finished. And you, between yourself, Martin Joseph, and Marlene McDonald, you encouraged me to recontest in 2013, right? And since 2013, you personally and privately has ensured that I served on the council as an alderman. You made an intervention, I understand, in 2016 and ensured that I'm there. So I want to thank you. I've never been able to have the opportunity to tell you thanks, and I want to thank you for that opportunity. And whatever happens moving forward, I want to tell you that I'm happy and grateful for all that you have done to inspire me. So if you've inspired no one, you've inspired me. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I must thank you for agreeing to accept the offer and for providing public service, because as far as I'm concerned, public service is always honorable. And when people agree to serve in the public domain, I am quite respectful and happy about that. So thank you very much.
Well,
he will be pretty good on a desk just north of Woodford Square.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
He'll be very good on a desk north of Woodford Square.
Who?
Prime Minister, I hope to hear invaders putting up a performance later.
North of Woodford Square is the Hall of Justice. What offense has he committed now?
Well, just east of that.
We've given all our guests the final minute to pitch to their constituents, so we want to do the same to you.
Let me just ask one question before you go, Prime Minister, and for your last minute. The facade of Port of Spain is not pleasing to the eyes, and as well as there are more and more homeless people within, I'll use Trinidad and Tobago, but mainly in Port of Spain. Is there any talks about reforming these individuals, get them off the streets?
We got a long way past thoughts. Let me just tell you what's happening. Many years ago, when I was housing minister, you entered Port of Spain after the flyover there, and there was on both sides of the road, there was the old foundry site, and there was the old motor car place on the right-hand side. The Ministry of Housing bought those properties. Later on, when the UNC came in, they dig two holes, supposedly as
detention ponds.
Detention ponds. Yeah. What we have done recently to address that issue you're raising about homelessness in the city, we have identified the foundry site as the place to build what we call an assessment center. Construction has only just begun, and I'm scheduled to open that construction in a week or two, but the contractor is on site. We are building a facility there which would deal with homeless people in the city, where they can be rehabilitated and reconnected to their families or supported away from the city streets. And if they have mental issues, get proper mental assessment and care and so on. That construction is starting or has started. When that facility is completed, there would be a zero tolerance for people on the streets in the city of Port of Spain.
Best news we've heard in a long time. Thank you very much.
That's
Final minute to you, Prime Minister.
Yeah. No?
Final minute to you, Prime
Final
Minister.
minute goes to you.
Oh, all I would like to say, I must thank you all for the opportunity to spend the morning with you. I didn't get, if I'd come in person, I would have got my tea and biscuits, but
Yeah, we missed that. We missed the extra talk too in the tea room. The extra talk we get in the tea room now. We missed that.
Maybe one of these days we can do that. But thank you very much for having me. I simply want to say to the population that if you have never voted in local government elections before, this is a good time to vote for to come out to the local government election and to vote, because you're voting for a transformation and an attempt to transform the country in a way that would be quite seminal. It's going to make a lot of changes for the benefit and for you in your neighborhood, wherever you live. We are hoping that local government transformation embodied in this local government reform effort will bring to you a benefit of an improved service delivery in your neighborhood, which will redound as an improvement in the quality of your life. Local government is important because that is where government is at your doorstep, on your street, in your drain. And we are talking about doing much more than that. Handling your local schools, encouraging programs, keeping young people engaged in activities, cultural and otherwise. Local government becomes like a management level that sees your needs and try to address them. So come out and vote in support of local government reform. And if you're going to do that, then you're required to vote PNM.
All right. X by the valley.
Everyone for being with us this morning. We appreciate you, and please don't be a stranger.
Thank you very much. I look forward to sitting down with you all again sometime soon. In-house.
In-house.
Yeah,
You will
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for being on the
Thank you,
podcast.
Prime Minister.
Good day.